Alright guys, today we're going to be talking about how to maximize your winter survival knife. Let's talk about some of the characteristics of what makes a good winter survival knife. Now, the first thing is the priorities of a winter survival knife. The first three priorities are going to be cold resistance, shelter construction, and fire making. Now, how we break that down is essentially we want something that has a rubberized handle so that it will continue to stay at least moderately temperatured in your hand. It won't become a frozen brick. We also want something that has a large blade that is good at chopping and that can span large pieces of wood for batoning. We also want something that's full tang because similar to the big blade, we want something that's going to be durable and that will hold up to use and abuse. Next thing we are going to need is the ability to strike a ferro rod. Once again, talking about the ability to make fire. If you can't strike a ferro rod, that limits one way of making fire. Next thing is we want it made out of a decent steel so that it is optimal, it will hold an edge well, and so on and so forth. So the first and what I believe to be one of the most important skills to start with when it comes to using and maximizing your winter survival knife is going to be batoning. Now, a lot of people think batoning is harsh on the knife, and certainly if the knife isn't well designed and is poorly constructed, it can break during batoning. But most knives, like the Scrama that you see here, is very tough. It's not going to break. It's not going to snap on you accidentally. And so it is definitely a useful ability to know how to do and to practice frequently. Not only can this be a very useful skill for, of course, breaking into wood, breaking down wood for fire starting, but you can also use batoning in a similar fashion to break down trees in the absence of a proper axe or proper hatchet. So batoning is a very, very useful skill, as you can see demonstrated here. The next skill here that I'm trying to showcase, maybe not doing the absolute best job of showcasing, but it is chopping. Chopping is another huge skill, especially for predominantly shelter construction. You can create things such as tent pegs to hold down tarps or makeshift fabric or cloth. You can also use it to, of course, chop down and process smaller, about wrist thick pieces of wood. And this is where, once again, having that, larger blade that's not excessively large, but anywhere from 7 to 12 inches in length, can allow you to break down and process wood that you can turn around to use in shelter construction. You can also use this to harvest things such as pine boughs and other very useful materials in shelter construction, such as wickiups and other robust winter shelters. Almost goes without saying, the next useful winter skill is going to be feather sticking. Now, this is obviously predominantly going to be useful for firecraft and fire making, but I think this is a very useful skill to especially practice with larger knives. As you can see, I ended up using the kind of front portion of this blade, almost where the belly was, and on different blades in different grinds, the useful portion of the blade may change where it is, and of course, once again, ergonomics being mindful. So this is why it's important not only to have a proper winter survival knife, but to, even if you just go into your backyard and practice these skills, to hone and practice these skills so that if you need them, you know how to use them and it makes sense. Next, of course, like I mentioned earlier in the kind of preface of this video, is ferro rod striking or fire steel striking. Once again, this is something that goes without saying, but does need some degree of practice, understanding where to strike your knife or where on the spine, or if you have to use the blade, at least understanding the strength and the weaknesses of your particular blade design is the important part here. Once again, practicing is key, especially practicing in the environment. Even if it's in the backyard, go out in the cold, practice these skills. Alright, lastly, at least in this video, there are certainly tons of useful winter skills to learn, to adapt, and to practice, but the last one that I wanted to showcase here is the creation of something along the lines of a draw knife. Now, once again, in the winter, useful motion and being productive and being the most productive you can be is very important. Also, reducing the risk of injury is another valuable skill. So here I show you guys how to make a down and dirty draw knife. Now, this is also one of the reasons why you may want a larger blade, because if you have to make a field expedient draw knife, it is going to take up blade length on your actual blade. But this is an effective and proven way to make a quick down and dirty draw knife that allows you to either make things such as feather sticks, it allows you to make that tinder and kindling, but also to, if you are looking to craft larger shelter structural things, this is another really well proven method to do those types of things as well. So once again, essentially what we're doing here is taking a, about wrist thick, a little bit smaller than a wrist thick tree, and we are cutting it down to a usable size, putting a small split in it at the top, and then lashing. Now, I did a very quick lashing here. If you were going to be using this for, weeks, potentially months, you'd want to put in a much stronger lashing. But essentially what that lashing does is just bind up that top portion that was split, and it prevents the blade from falling out, or at least going up. And so that's why it's important to put that kind of cross-hatched X in there. And then lastly, what I like about this method is you get your lashing tight, then you can remove your blade, use your blade as you would normally, and then drive your blade back into this makeshift handle to use it once again. So super simple, super easy, but very effective.